So I grew up in the mountains of West Virginia, where there's trout stream around every corner. And at a young age, my dad had me out teaching me how to fish almost every weekend. But he wasn't just teaching me how to fish, he was teaching me how to fly fish. Now, fly fishing is a pretty tough sport for an adult to learn, much less a kid, but I was very persistent and I fell in love as soon as I started it. Once I got a little older, got into high school, my friends and I, we would be out fishing all summer long. We were fishing every weekend. We didn't care what the weather was, we didn't care what time of year it was, we were just out having fun. Well, as most young men do, everything would always turn into a competition. Who's going to catch the most fish? Who's going to catch the biggest fish? Who's going to catch the smallest fish? Well, I almost never caught the most fish or the smallest fish, but I almost always caught the biggest fish. Now, why is that? Well, we were fishing two different styles. We were using the same tool, a fly rod, but we were using different tactics with that fly rod. My friends were almost always dry fly fishermen, where I was what they call a streamer fisherman. And for those of you who don't know, when someone's a dry fly fisherman, they're using a lure that's made out of some type of feather or hair and it's supposed to resemble a bug or a fly. And they cast it out into the river, they let it float down, and they're hoping that there's a hungry trout laying on the bottom that looks up, sees it, and gets his meal. Well, if you're a streamer fisherman, we're still using a lure that's made out of hair and feathers or a combination of both, but it's big. It's supposed to imitate a fish, a prey fish. And the whole point is to cast out and try to entice a big fish to come in and either attack and kill the smaller fish or attack and eat the smaller fish. And to put it a different way, in a 2015 article titled "The Streamer Cult" by Joe Cromell, he says that the difference between a streamer junkie and a dry fly guy is that one waits for the trout to eat while the other one makes the trout to eat. So this is what I was just saying about the dry fly. You're waiting. A streamer, you're trying to make that fish eat. Well, how can you catch one of these big fish? We're not talking about any fish, we're talking about a trout. We're talking about a big brown trout, specifically a male brown trout. And anyone that's ever been fishing, especially for trout, they've seen pictures of these huge male brown trout that are all collared up. They're beautiful yet ugly at the same time. They have a gold orange collar to them. They have a big humongous hooked front jaw. Well, in a 2017 article in Fisheries Management and Ecology, it states that knowledge of predator-prey dynamics is essential to understanding a functional ecosystem. Well, how would this help you out when catching this big fish? Well, a big brown trout is the biggest boy in the river. It is a predator. It's the apex predator in the river. It's only there for two reasons. One, to eat and stay alive, and two, to reproduce and carry on its genealogy. So they're very aggressive. For instance, during the spawning season, these fish, there could be quite a few trout around in this river. There might only be 3 brown trout in one hole. There might be a big female and 2 males. Well, those males are going to fight each other to try to get dominance, and one male is going to chase the other one out, and then it's going to take claim to the female and wait for the female to lay its eggs so they can fertilize it, and then it can carry on its genes. Well, during this time of year, the trout are so aggressive, it wouldn't matter what you throw in there to try to catch it. If it looks like a fish, that big male brown trout is going to chase out and either kill or attack that fish just to get it out of its territory. Predators are very territorial. It's a big thing to learn. When you're casting out with a streamer, we're casting out, we're bringing it straight across the river so that the fish sees a wide profile of what it is, and it doesn't care what's coming through there, it just wants to get it out. Another thing to talk about is how the fish eat. You need to know what these big fish are eating. What kind of minnows are in your river? What other kind of prey are in your river? Are there crawfish? Are there sculpins? Are there little trout? Is your state stocking trout? Some big trout are known to eat up to 12-inch trout as a meal. So, Kelly Gallup, who's a famous brown trout fisherman out of Montana, he wrote an article in Field and Stream magazine in 2013 that says that a predator fish eats its prey head first. This is another very important thing that I learned throughout my years. When I was young, because my dad taught me this way, we would always park his truck and we would walk 3 to 5 miles up into the woods, and then we would fish our way back down to the truck. Well, typically, when you're doing that, you're fishing downstream. the water is going downstream. These fish are sitting looking upstream. So when you're casting down, you're bringing your lure, your streamer, whatever it may be, you're bringing it up the river. And I've had many occasions where I noticed when I would cast out, I would see a big fish come up and try to get my fly, but it's coming from the back side. And it would always come up and then decide to go away because those trout want to eat from the head first. And this makes sense because almost all fish have fins. Almost all prey fish have some sort of protective spine that sticks up. And that is so the fish has to eat that fish from the head first so that it can swallow its prey. If it's eating it from the tail first, it could have a really tough time swallowing it, and it could end up getting injured in the end. Well, throughout my years, I started using different tactics, and like I said, these were the two main tactics that I realized. Always remember that big fish like a big meal. Big fish are predators. Predators don't like to have anything come into their territory. So you want to use something big, you want it to be fast, you want it to be energetic. That way, whenever you do have a big fish, one of these trophy male brown trout, come out to attack your lure, it's got violence to it, it's aggressive. And that makes the fishing more fun. And there's always one more thing that I would like to talk about when we come to fishing. Where I live, we have tons of wild reproducing brown trout. I take my son out fishing, I teach him, he's 8 years old and he knows how to fly fish. And I've always tried to tell him we practice catch and release. Catch and release of brown trout is a very important thing. It'll help the fish survive, it helps them get bigger, it helps them reproduce so that other generations down the road can have an opportunity to catch these big trophy fish as well, like my son or your kids in the future. So, I hope you learned something today, and go out there and try to go fishing.